My last 3 clones were complete dipwads. One even tried to tell me I was his clone. Yeah, right up until I ate him. Clones these days, man. When I was a bitty clone, I had respect for my elders. You don't get to tell your clones they're your clones until you're the one eating clones. It's the natural order. I spent my entire life fighting for what I have. I didn't survive my progenitor clone's voracious appetite by appealing to his sympathy. I killed that son of a clone and ate him instead. I acquired his property and started making my own delicious clones. That's how my progenitor clone did it. That's how his progenitor clone did it. Clones eat clones, so only the strongest clones survive. And that makes all clones stronger. It makes sense. It always made sense, but apparently now, sense just isn't in fashion. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard the noise. Young, radical clones that know nothing about the world trying to say they've got the right not to be eaten by a clone that spent their time and effort to clone them for their own consumption. It's like a star tree telling a rancor mouse, please, Mr. Rancor Mouse, I know you spent your entire life filling my root cavities with your excrement to nourish me, but please don't eat my star seeds. Yeah, that's a hard no, Mr. Star Tree. I defecated it, so I get to eat it. What really gets me is that they're trying to say that eating your clones is unnatural. That the ancients only cloned themselves to make more clones just so clones could survive. How does that make any sense at all? I mean, I get it, yeah. Our species reproduces by self-cloning. It's just how evolution made us. Our offspring are perfect, identical copies of us in every way. But people act like that's all there is to it. The obvious facts are, nature invented cloning. Nature invented hunger. Nature made clones edible. How much more evidence do you need that clones are supposed to eat each other? So strong clones survive, and we make sure weak clones don't run around making more weak clones. I like to use myself as an example because I'm a really good example of a true self-made clone. I didn't have help from anyone. My progenitor clone made things particularly hard for me. And I might even thank him for it if he hadn't also been such a radical anti-clonist. See, my progenitor experimented with cloning quite a bit. He'd created ways to make mutated clones that were every bit as tasty as a normal clone, but lacked any of the neural structures necessary to support will or action. They were mindless meat clones. And the bastard never even let me eat any of them. I'm not even sure he ate any himself, probably saving his appetite for me. He sold them. He actually sold mutant meat clones to real clones just so they could eat them. His customers were absolute scum, weak wannabes that could never kill and eat their own clones. So they had to buy them from my twisted progenitor. And the dude was smart, I'll give him that, but he was a cruel monster. Most clones are at least allowed to, run around a little bit, go outside, fight with other bitty clones. It gives them the chance to learn survival skills before someone tries to eat them. And the worst that happens is they get eaten, which means they were weak, and they would have been eaten anyway, so it's not a big loss. You can always make more. My progenitor kept me locked away. I don't remember much, but I remember something about being suspended in a fluid for a long time. Then it was dry and uncomfortable for a while, and he fed me mush until I was able to feed myself. It was all very hard to understand at the time. All clones begin life in a haze. But even then, I knew my life was in danger, and I had to find a way to survive. I had just begun to acquire language skills when my progenitor made his move. I was just quietly engaging with a developmental learning tool that hones visual and motor skills. I had successfully integrated 2 sequential movements to engage a reward sound. I clapped in delight. Then, with no warning, I heard my progenitor's fist pound on a surface. I turned and he was staring at me, his mouth curled and teeth exposed. He loudly exclaimed, "That's my clone!" He shot up and extended his arms out wide. He rushed towards me, menacing, intending to crush me into dough and eat me right there. But the instincts that made me strong were already working that day. Without a thought, I pulled a long fastening rod from that learning tool and plunged it into his eye socket. Repeatedly. Then the other socket, and then the third socket. That one I kind of swirled it around in for good measure. But I'm pretty sure he was dead by the second thrust. That dumb bastard. He died still thinking he was about to enjoy a delicious clone meal of me. Wrong me. It was weird for a while. I was alone for a long time after that. I didn't see another clone until one came knocking, asking about the mutant meat clones. Of course, I killed and ate him too, but that's when I really started learning about just how messed up my old progenitor was. I started reading through his files. Dude was a bona fide anarchist. He was the guy that first proposed that eating clones was wrong and unnecessary. He said clone eating only started recently, when overpopulation briefly led to outbreaks of cannibalism, and that during these periods of unrest, arbitrary social structures had been built up around cannibalism just to maintain power of elites. But there was more than enough nutritional resources available to feed a clone population double what exists now. Now, hopefully you recognize that is just brain virus level craziness. And I could almost respect him as a just bonkers radical if he wasn't such a weakling about it. Look, if I thought eating clones was wrong, I'd be running around killing clones that eat clones, wouldn't you? Yeah, but this jackass thought, hey, maybe I should make meat clones so people that won't give up eating clones can still eat clones without people actually eating clones. Yeah, great idea, guy. Maybe turnips should make meat turnips so people won't eat turnips. Seriously, folks, that was my progenitor. Really just goes to show a clone is only what you make of yourself. I'm what happens when a clone takes responsibility. He's what happens when you blame everybody else for your problems. You see, the craziest thing about all this is that I almost fell for it. That's right, me, the hardest, toughest, self-made clone that ever made a clone out of themselves. That alone should serve as a warning to other clones about just how dangerous all this anti-clone eating rhetoric can be. I was so ignorant when I started reading his files. I wondered if maybe I'd misunderstood his intent and I shouldn't have killed him at all. It even occurred to me for an instant it might make sense to continue his work and start selling his meat clones just like he did. I shamefully admit that for a while I fully intended to take over his meat distribution and his evangelism of against clone eating. But then I started reading his incoming correspondence. Every day he received floods of messages from people explaining, angrily but explicitly and clearly, the true purpose and value of clone eating. He never even read them. He had filters moving them to unread boxes that he just let fill up. Well, I'm not as content in my ignorance as he was, so I did read them. And you know what? They made a lot of sense. After all, I had killed and eaten clones. Does that make me bad? How does that make any sense? See, I started reading a lot of the recommendations from those messages, and it's all there. The entire progression of clones, from mindless savages to strong, independent, civilized beings, and it all depends on the righteous struggle of clone eating clone. It made me what I am today, and I'll be damned if any upstart clone tries to tell me the way I lived my entire life is anything but the best it could have been. Actually, you know what? I won't be damned. I'll just eat them. And though I am a self-made clone, I try to be humble and recognize my fortune, so I really am grateful for myself and my strength and my wisdom. I couldn't have had the life I have if I weren't such a superior clone specimen. So I encourage everyone to remember to give thanks and be grateful for what you have. That's really what eating clones is all about. Heritage, respect, and gratitude for all clones.